Perfection is paralysis, or so the old saying goes, or adage, or expression. The point is, the expression itself has been something that has been said multiple times throughout, well, history, I suppose. We're off to a wonderful start. I can't remember exactly where I first encountered the expression. I think it was a Joe Rogan podcast or perhaps a Dan Pena video. But usually that video just involves him screaming meathead at me a lot. That being said, if you have been a creative individual over the last lifetime, then you will have noticed something that happens whenever you work on a creative project, and that is perfectionism gets in the way. You know what you want, you know what your artistic vision is, you have it in your brain, but you need to take it out of your brain and put it into real life. Whether it's a drawing, a painting, a cake, what do you call those little muffin things that you put in the oven? Soufflés, that's the word. Apparently there's artistic expression to those as well. But I'm not a chef or a baker. Perfectionism in and of itself is something that I deal with constantly. And you might think, well, how does that affect you, Simon? Well, I mean, take a look at my videos. The last time I was consistent in videos was about 4 years ago. Yeah, I ended up spending way too much time doing shit that didn't matter in order to create a video that I hoped would be good. And in all fairness, the videos were kind of good. I was quite proud of the videos. But should I have taken years to do them? No, but I did anyway, and it's the same for other projects as well, like my freelancing work or everyday stuff, or even things like exercise and trying to get my life in order, and I think that's the case for a lot of people. Perfectionism is something that happens to everyone, and we don't even intend for it to happen. It just does, and we avoid things as a result, or procrastinate. Fun. So what exactly is perfectionism? Like, if we were to go and describe it, how would we actually describe it? Perfectionism. Noun. A personal standard, attitude, or philosophy that demands perfection and rejects anything less. Now that seems pretty straightforward, right? Why is perfectionism such a bad thing? The reason it's a bad thing is, well, we're human beings. We're not meant to do anything perfectly. We are going to fail and mess up constantly. And the problem is with perfectionism, it's not just the willingness to try to be perfect, it's also the unwillingness to accept anything less than perfect. So it often ends up meaning you don't get much actually done. You actually are less productive and less likely to finish a project because it's never going to be finished. The way I would describe this as an analogy is, imagine for a second that you're creating something, right? And in your mind's eye, there's this little floating progress bar, right? What's wrong with it? And it, no matter how much work you do, is constantly at 99%. Now, you can imagine for a second that, oh, I'm working 20 hours a day on this particular project, and yet no matter what I do, it never goes to 100. That's what perfectionism is. It's the constant feeling like you could just do one more thing to improve it, rather than releasing it out into the world and doing the job it was intended to do. You are sitting there at 99% constantly. You see, part of being human means being imperfect, and we are never going to be perfect. No matter what we do, say, think, or feel, we will always be imperfect, and that's just a fact, and that's okay. But unfortunately, it's very difficult for people to comprehend, especially whenever they're perfectionists. And I myself used to be an extreme perfectionist until I slowly started to realize that, hey, failure is actually good for you. You learn from failure. It helps you grow. And also, the more you create, the easier things become. And you just kind of have to just throw stuff out into the world, even when it doesn't feel like it's fully completed. You just gotta, or you're never going to finish creating anything. We can choose excellence, but there comes a point that you just have to release stuff. And a great example of this is the Law of Diminishing Returns. Now, typically this was a model for economics, but it works in other situations as well. So basically the Law of Diminishing Returns, it goes a little something like this. Let's say you have a graph here. I'll have a graph up on the screen so you can see what's going on. Eventually you can do a certain amount of work for a project, whatever it might be. But eventually it'll get to the point where no matter what you do, it will return less and less and less in terms of value. So no matter how much you want to be perfect, eventually there comes a point where the amount of work you put in is not on the same level as value as other people are going to get. And that's an unfortunate reality of life, but it's very important to remember. But something to note as well is perfectionism often gets people to avoid things as well. Not just in terms of like procrastination and avoiding doing actual topics and jobs and other various things. It also, on occasion, will get people to not do anything new because you can't do it perfectly the first time. Like take an instrument, for example, or learning a new way of art. You can't do it perfectly the first time, so why try? And it gets to the point where you don't experiment or try new things whatsoever out of the fear of rejection or the fear of failure or just the fact that you can't do it perfectly. And I think the greatest quote I have ever seen to date to combat this comes from Adventure Time.
Dude, sucking at something is the first step towards being sorta good at something.
The simple truth is, while perfectionism can be an incredible boon for some people, for the vast majority of others, it is unproductive and unhealthy, and it is not something that you should strive towards. So, how exactly do we solve this little issue of perfectionism? I don't think necessarily that we can solve it, but we can combat it, and there are a few different ways that we can actually go about doing this. One of the best examples of how to combat this comes from a channel called Struthless, and they have a video that's actually dedicated to the perfectionism thing as well. And they have an incredible video on this, and I will link it down below for obvious reasons. But one of the things that they have was called the 70% rule, and the 70% rule goes as follows. Remember earlier I talked about the percentage bar being at 99%? Basically, their rule of thumb, Struthless's rule of thumb, is as follows. Aim for 70%, not 100%. 70% is a lot easier to attain. Fuck. It's a lot easier to complete, a lot easier to make possible, and for perfectionists, good God. And for perfectionists, it is much easier and much better to be able to produce a whole lot of content or projects, etc., at 70%, because we'll actually complete them then. Another quote that Struthless puts into his video that makes a hell of a lot of sense, even to me, surprisingly to me, is your body of work is only as good as the project you finish. And that is a hell of a statement right there. It makes sense, it's accurate, it's truthful, and perfectionists really need to get that through their skulls, including myself. And that has taken me a long time to achieve, hence why I'm able to record this video, and still bumble around like a babbling idiot. Or buffoon. I should use the word buffoon. On top of the 70% rule, there are other ways that you can actually do this and combat the whole thing. Perfectionism. Much easier. And that's one of the ways that you can do that is set attainable goals. Like if you're creating a YouTube channel, like one of your goals might be, get 100 subscribers. You wouldn't instantly put down 10 million subscribers. You just wouldn't do that. Same way as you wouldn't go into your workplace and say, I'm going to complete 100 different tasks today. And while that may be possible for some people, the average person, probably not. So set attainable goals. Goals that you can complete fairly, not easily, but goals that are hard to attain, but you can still attain them with a bit of effort. I think that's probably the better one, because then you challenge yourself and then you get stuff done as well. And you feel good about yourself because you tick something off a list. On top of that, you want to embrace failure. That's not something perfectionists do or want to do. Failure on its own is a bad thing, yes, but learning from your failure, that is progress. And I think that is something that even people who aren't perfectionists can get behind. The more you fail, the more you learn. And when you watch, and this is a great one, when you look at other people's failures and learn from their failures too, you learn so much more. It's quite immaculate, really. Another concept is just get started. Most of the time, we are so afraid or procrastinating or just trying to avoid creating whatever it is or working on things that, the perfectionism just gets in the way or it makes us procrastinate. If you just get started on something, I think there's like the concept of like the 2-minute rule. If you just get started on something and do it for 2 minutes, even if you don't continue doing it, you started. There is a real thing to be said for, half the battle is just getting started. It really is. Just get started. Just go do the thing. Do the doings. And lastly, be imperfect intentionally. Look, we're not perfect beings, and we should never pretend that we are. So when I say be imperfect intentionally, I mean intentionally be okay with fucking up. Intentionally be okay with doing things to the best of your abilities and then just releasing it into the world. Imperfection and flaws are sometimes what we call quirks, sometimes what we call beauty, sometimes what we call being human. And I don't think that we should judge ourselves based on the fact that we fuck up sometimes or that we don't create things perfectly. That's not fair to do to yourself, and it's not fair to do to others. Perfectionism is not a good thing. While it can create immaculate pieces of art and incredible pieces of culture, it often has an extreme detriment to the creator. So don't be afraid to be imperfect intentionally. And lastly but not least, I will leave you with a quote. Don't take life seriously. Either way, you won't make it out alive. Thanks for watching.